Hello, everyone. Cliff Dubois here on the path to 1 million. I want to share a story with you this morning. So I was thinking last night that I remembered when my mom and dad got married. It was 1981 that they got married. And I remember being out in front of our house just outside of Chicken Scratch, Michigan. And my dad was driving down the road and he had this huge motorhome, right? And I remember that I'd seen motorhomes on TV. Sometimes I would see them when we were going down the freeway, but as far as actually being in one or traveling in one, I'd never done that before. He pulled into the driveway with that thing. It was just monstrously huge, right? And he parked it in our turnaround space, and eventually he would find a spot for it in the yard. But I just remember that thing was just huge, and it was packed full of his stuff, and he brought it over to the house, and he was moving all of his stuff into the house and everything else like that. And it wasn't too long later that we decided to take our first family trip in the motorhome. We were going to Arizona. I had an aunt and uncle that lived in Arizona with their kids, some cousins I hadn't seen in a while. I remember the day that we left, it was 4 a.m. in the morning, something along those lines anyways, because we always had to leave at 4 a.m. I don't know why. There was no traffic in Chicken Scratch, Michigan to beat, but we had to be on the road by 4 a.m. So we would walk around the house, making sure we got everything. And my mom's like, "Oh, did you pack underwear?" For some reason, she had an obsession with clean underwear. I'm not sure why. But we would walk around the house and just make sure that we have everything. And we would take one last look. And the very last thing that my dad would do is he would pick up the keys off the counter. And then my mom would lean over and shut off the light. We would walk out the door, climb in the motorhome, and we would go. And I remember on that particular trip to Arizona, it was my first time traveling in a motorhome across the country like that. It was quite an experience. I remember that my stepdad or my dad, his kids, AJ and Roger, went with us to Arizona, but it was a lot of fun, and it was one of those vacations where I really got to travel outside of an area that I had been to. I've been to Florida a number of times, been to Ohio a number of times, obviously, because it's Cedar Point. But I remember we would go to Arizona, and we actually had a great trip. A number of years later, it was high school, and I had picked a college to go to in Florida, and my mom wanted to go see it. And I knew that it was one of those times in my life where, one chapter was ending and a new one was beginning. And for me, it was the fact that, high school was drawing to a close. It was my senior year, and I had to make a decision of where I was going to go. I had already been accepted to this university. So we went and piled up into the car and we went. And I know that, the day that, we were supposed to leave, we were only going to be gone for 3 or 4 days. Wasn't very long at all. It was over spring break. But, once again, we're packing up our stuff and getting ready to go. And mom asked me, "Do you have clean underwear?" And I'd look around the house, and she'd look around the house, and dad look around the house. And, very last thing dad would do is pick up the keys off the counter, and we would walk out the door. And we would be on our way to Florida. And also, too, another point, with us traveling to Florida was when, I actually got accepted into the university. We went down there. The car was packed full of my stuff. I was crammed in the back seat of the car. Everything was piled up into my trunk, piled up in the seat next to me, everything that I would need, like clothes, clean underwear. But I remember that, once again, it's when we were leaving the house, I knew that my life was going to change. That was one chapter that was coming to an end, another chapter that was opening. It was time for us to go to university. And, dad picked up the keys off the counter, out the door we went, and there was no turning back. We made it to college, got my stuff moved into my dorm room, got a chance to meet my 2 roommates, and a few days later, mom and dad were looking around the dorm room, and they said, "Okay, it's time for us to go." And, I gave them a goodbye and thanked them for everything. And told them that we would definitely be in touch. And they, dad picked the keys up off my desk, and they both walked out the door, got in the car, and drove off. A number of years later, when I got hit by the bus, and that really screwed up my leg pretty bad. And I called mom up on the phone, and I said, "Don't be surprised to learn that I got hit by a bus." And, I had insurance, so I wasn't worried about it. And, I was going to go to the doctor, but my mom completely freaked out. She was all obsessed with whether I was wearing clean underwear or not. And they decided to make a trip to Florida. And I can imagine before they walked out the door, of course, that they're looking around, making sure they've got everything. Dad picked the keys up off the counter, and off they came. And I remember sitting in my apartment in Florida. They didn't tell me that they were coming, but I remember sitting in my apartment in Florida watching TV, and all of a sudden I heard something rattle off to the side. And I turn around and look, and there's my dad's head poking through the blinds of the back door. I don't know why they didn't knock on the door. They just assumed I wouldn't be there, but I couldn't walk. My knee was the size of a bowling ball. It hurt like hell. I just knew, though, that, it was, of course it was nice to see them, but I was really, really surprised that they were there, and of course their family. But, even thinking back, even coming to California, when I moved here to California, my parents always drove. They didn't want to fly. They didn't want to get in a plane and travel across the country because they wanted to see flyover land. They wanted to see all these beautiful states that were going on, all the different mountains that they could see and the different landscapes that they could see. But they would always drive to California, and I was always happy, when they showed up, because it was quite a trek for them. I know it was. One particular trip towards the end, I do know that they made it to California, and for some reason or another, my dad didn't write down my driver or my home address, so they were lost. They knew that I lived somewhere on Newport Avenue, but they just weren't sure where. So they saw a house that kind of looked like mine, and so they stopped. And my dad walked around the property, and finally some older gentleman came out and said, "Can I help you?" And they said, "Yes, our son lives on Newport. We're just not sure where." So, this older couple, just for reasons I've yet to understand, they were like, "Oh, well, while you're waiting for him to get home from work, why don't you come on in?" So my mom and dad sat in this stranger's house and had tea with them, and they told them about my life journey to California and Michigan, and they had a great conversation. And finally they did call me, and I'm like, "Where are you guys at?" And they told me. I'm like, "Man, you guys aren't even close to my house." But I gave them the address, and I said, "Do you want me to come get you?" They're like, "Oh, no." So, once again, Dad picks up the keys, and they walk out the door, and they drive to my house. And, they did this for a number of years. I lived in California now for, I want to say probably close to 20, 21 years now. And every year, like clockwork, they would always come out in the springtime, every single year. So you can imagine it was probably, I want to say it was like maybe 3 years ago that when Mom and Dad came out for a visit, Mom pulled me off to the side and she said, "We can't drive to California anymore. It's too much on Dad." And by then, the disease that my mom had pretty much claimed her vision. She could not drive. And I knew it was taking its toll on them, because when they finally would make it to California, they would literally probably spend the first 2 to 3 days just sleeping. They were pretty wiped out. But I remember that, when they, packed up all their stuff and they were getting ready to walk out the door, that Mom turned and gave me a hug, and I gave Dad a hug, and I thanked them so much for coming. And I remember that when they were walking out to the car, that I was thinking to myself, Cliff, this is the last time you're going to see them drive away from your house. And there was a part of me that wanted to pull out my phone and video it, so I would always have that memory. But for some reason, I knew that if I videoed it, that it would take me out of the moment. And for me, it was more important for me to experience that moment than anything. So I stood on the front porch and I watched them drive away for the last time. And that was really sad. And I remember I cried when they left. Because it was just one of those signs where it was just like, my parents are getting older. And it just really messed me up for a couple of days, And so anyways, this last week, my dad put down the keys for the last time. The doctor told him point blank that he can't drive anymore. And my dad listened, and I think the only reason why he kept driving was because my mom was pushing him a little bit, because she was scared that, without them having the ability to drive, they wouldn't be able to do things like go to church or go to the grocery store or anything else like that. So, anyways, Mom was telling me this the other day on the phone, and it really broke my heart. and it was just something that was very hard to process. My dad's always been a good man, and he's always taken care of my mom, but there just came a point where he couldn't do it anymore. So, anyways, I always try to remind myself that, usually there's always a new beginning at the end of every painful ending. So, it's just one of those life lessons to be learned, and I know that there's going to be some changes coming up in the future. And but anyways, I know a lot of you have been, kind of wondering what's been going on, and I've been getting notes on Facebook, so I just want to let you know that that's where that is right now. So I'll actually be in Michigan next week, and I'm sure we'll have some more conversations about how we're going to handle this and how we're going to go forward. So I have to really thank everybody for the love that they've shown my parents and for helping out. Thank you for that, Sherry. I really appreciate it. And anyways, I just wanted to share that with you today. Something that's been weighing heavily on my mind, and I look forward to talking to you guys tomorrow with a story. So anyways, have a good day, enjoy your Sunday, and I'll talk to you later.